The Golden Fork Diner stood like a tired sentinel on a rain-soaked corner of Chicago's South Side, its neon sign flickering in the gray twilight of July 2025. The city outside was a blur of wet asphalt and hunched figures under umbrellas, hurrying past shuttered storefronts and overflowing homeless shelters. Inside, the diner smelled of burnt coffee and frying grease, a faint hum of resilience clinging to its faded red booths and scuffed linoleum floors. Once a neighborhood staple, the Golden Fork now teetered on the edge of survival, caught in the crosshairs of a post-inflation economy that had gutted the wallets of Chicago's working class. The year was 2025, and America's heartland was still reeling from skyrocketing costs and a job market that offered little mercy to people like Sarah Miller. Sarah, a 24-year-old waitress with chestnut hair tied in a loose ponytail, moved through the diner with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent years balancing trays and tempers. Her green eyes, bright but shadowed by exhaustion, scanned the half-empty dining room as she wiped down a sticky table. Her apron speckled with coffee stains was a badge of her double shift 12 hours today, with another waiting tomorrow. Every dollar she earned went to her mother, Linda, whose diabetes had turned their lives into a tightrope walk over a sea of medical bills. The pharmacy's latest demand for upfront payment, $400 for insulin, thanks to gaps in their insurance, loomed. In Sarah's mind, as did the $250 electric bill she'd stuffed in a drawer, hoping it would magically disappear. "Sarah, move it. Table 4 has been waiting 5 minutes for their check." The voice belonged to Michael Grant, the diner's owner, a lean man in his late 40s whose polished blazer clashed with the diner's worn charm. Michael stood behind the counter, his sharp eyes tracking every move like a hawk. He'd bought the Golden Fork a decade ago, dreaming of turning it into an upscale bistro, but the economic crash of 2023 had crushed those plans. Now, he clung to control, micromanaging his staff and obsessing over the diner's image in a neighborhood where image meant little to those struggling to eat. "Sorry, Mr. Grant," Sarah said, her voice soft but steady. She grabbed a check for table 4, a tired trucker and his teenage son, and flashed a smile as she handed it over. "Anything else I can get you folks?" The trucker, his face lined with fatigue, shook his head. "Just keep the coffee coming, kid. You're doing great." Sarah's smile lingered, but it didn't reach her heart. Kind words didn't pay bills, and she was one bad day away from losing the only job that kept her and her mother afloat. Chicago's service industry was brutal in 2025, with wages stagnant at $12 an hour while rent and groceries climbed relentlessly. The news was a daily drumbeat of despair. Homelessness up 25% since the last recession. Food banks stretched thin, and small businesses, like the Golden Fork, fighting to survive against corporate chains with their slick apps and delivery drones. Sarah had applied to dozens of jobs, retail, warehouses, even gig work, but the diner was her only lifeline dot as she cleared a table. The bell above the door chimed, and a man stepped inside, shaking rain from a tattered brown coat. He was middle-aged, with graying hair matted by the storm, and a beard that looked like it hadn't seen a trim in months. His boots left faint mud prints on the floor, and his jeans were frayed at the cuffs. To most, he was just another drifter, one of the many who wandered Chicago's streets, casualties of an economy that discarded people as easily as it did dreams. But Sarah saw something else, a quiet dignity in his posture, a flicker of resolve in his hazel eyes. The man, who would later introduce himself as James Carter, slid into a booth near the back, his gaze sweeping the diner with a mix of caution and curiosity. Sarah approached, her notepad ready, her smile professional but warm. "Welcome to the Golden Fork. Can I start you with something to drink?" "Water," James said, his voice low and gravelly, like he hadn't spoken much that day. "And I'd like to see the menu." Sarah handed him a creased, laminated menu, noticing his hands rough, with dirt under the nails, but steady, as if they'd once held more than just a diner menu. She stepped away to fetch his water, but Michael's voice stopped her cold. "Who's that?" he hissed, leaning over the counter. "He looks like he hasn't bathed in a week. You better make sure he's got cash, Sarah, or it's your problem." "He's just a customer, Mr. Grant," Sarah replied, keeping her tone even. Her stomach twisted. Michael's no undesirables rule was a constant thorn in her side. He'd installed cameras last year to monitor the staff, claiming it was for security, but Sarah knew it was about power. Every move she made was watched, recorded, judged. One wrong step, and she'd be out the door with her mother's medication hanging in the balance. She brought James's water and waited as he studied the menu, his brow furrowed in thought. "I'll take the ribeye steak," he said finally, "with mashed potatoes and asparagus. Medium rare." Sarah blinked. The ribeye was $42, the priciest item on the menu, a luxury even regulars rarely splurged on. "That's one of our more expensive dishes," she said carefully. "You sure that's what you want?" James met her gaze, a faint smile playing at his lips. "I'm sure. Been a long time since I had something worth eating. Let's make it special." Sarah nodded, jotting down the order, but her mind churned. She'd seen people order beyond their means before, usually out of desperation or defiance, but James's calm certainty threw her. If he couldn't pay, she'd be on the hook, and her $18 in tips wouldn't cover it. Still, she couldn't bring herself to challenge him further. There was something about him, a story she couldn't read, but wanted to understand. As she relayed the order to the kitchen, Emily, her co-worker and confidant, sidled up. "You're nuts, Sarah," she whispered, her freckled face creased with concern. "Grant's gonna lose it if that guy can't pay. You know how he is about those people. I can't just kick him out," Sarah said, glancing at James, who was sipping his water and staring out at the rain. "He's hungry, and maybe he's got money." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Right? And maybe I'll be CEO of Amazon tomorrow." Sarah forced a laugh, but her chest tightened. She thought of her mother, Linda, who'd raised her on stories of faith and kindness, quoting Bible verses about helping those in need. "Do good, Sarah," Linda would say, "and it'll come back to you, even if it takes time." Those words were Sarah's anchor, but they felt fragile against the reality of her life, a life where kindness could cost her everything. The kitchen bell rang, and Sarah carried James's plate to his table, the scent of grilled steak drawing curious glances from other customers. James's eyes lit up, and for a moment, he looked like a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be full. "Thank you, miss," he said, his voice soft but earnest. "This means more than you know." "Enjoy," Sarah said, turning away, but Michael's glare followed her like a storm cloud. She could feel the weight of his judgment, the cameras, unblinking eyes, the ticking clock of her decision. She busied herself refilling coffee pots, but her thoughts kept circling back to James. Who was he? A homeless man with a taste for luxury? A con artist? Or something else entirely? As the rain pounded harder outside, the diner grew quiet. The few remaining customers huddled over their meals. Sarah's shift was nearing its end, but the moment of truth loomed. She approached James's table with the bill, her heart racing. The total was $48.75, a small fortune in her world. She set the check down, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Here's your bill, sir, whenever you're ready." James looked at the slip, then up at her, his expression unreadable. "Miss, I've got to be straight with you," he said, his voice low. "I don't have the money to pay for this." Sarah's breath caught. Her worst fear had come true, and Michael's shadow loomed larger than ever. She glanced at him, his arms crossed, his face a mask of suspicion. The diner seemed to shrink around her, the walls closing in. She had a choice to make, and it would change everything. The Golden Fork Diner was a cocoon of fluorescent light against the relentless Chicago rain, but inside, the air crackled with tension. Sarah Miller stood frozen at James Carter's booth, the bill for his $48.75 ribeye meal lying untouched between them. His words, "I don't have the money to pay for this," echoed in her mind, a quiet bombshell that threatened to unravel her already precarious world. Behind her, Michael Grant's glare burned like a spotlight, his presence a reminder of the cameras that recorded every misstep. Sarah's heart pounded, her meager $18 in tips weighing heavily in her apron pocket. Paying for James's meal would mean going hungry herself, maybe missing a payment for her mother's insulin. But sending him away, or worse, calling the police, felt like betraying the one thing that kept her going, her belief in doing right, no matter the cost. Sarah took a deep breath, her green eyes meeting James's steady gaze. There was no deceit in his expression, only a quiet resignation, as if he'd faced this moment before. "Sir," she said softly, "if you don't have money, you shouldn't have ordered the most expensive thing on the menu." Her tone was gentle, but a thread of frustration wove through it. She wasn't angry at him, more at the world that put them both in this position. James leaned forward, his voice low but deliberate. "I know, miss. I wanted to feel like my old self for one night. Back when I could walk into a place like this and order whatever I wanted. I used to own a business, you know? Had money, a house, the works. But life's got a way of humbling you." He paused, his eyes distant. "The crash in '23 took it all. Now, here I am." Sarah's chest tightened. The economic fallout of 2023 had been a slow-motion disaster, wiping out small businesses and leaving countless people like James on the streets. Chicago's homeless population had surged, with shelters turning away families and food banks rationing supplies. She'd seen the headlines: unemployment hits 10-year high, evictions soar in Midwest, and felt the ripple effects in her own life. Her mother, Linda, had lost her part-time job at a grocery store that year, and Sarah's student loans had ballooned with interest. James's story wasn't new, but it hit close to home. "Sarah." Michael's voice snapped her back to reality. He was striding toward the booth, his blazer flapping, his face a mask of irritation. "What's the holdup? This guy paying or what?" Sarah turned, her hands clenching the edge of her apron. "I'm handling it, Mr. Grant," she said, forcing calm into her voice, but her mind raced. She could feel the weight of the cameras, the eyes of the few remaining customers, the ticking clock of her decision. If she covered James's bill, she'd be out nearly 3 days' worth of tips. If she didn't, Michael would call the cops, and James would face humiliation or worse, arrest. Chicago's police had cracked down on petty crimes lately, a response to rising tensions in the city, and Sarah couldn't bear the thought of James being another statistic. "I'll take care of it," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She reached into her apron, pulled out her tips, and counted out $50 in crumpled bills. "Here," she said, sliding the money toward the register. "It's covered." Michael's eyes narrowed. "You're paying for him? Are you out of your mind? This isn't a charity, Sarah. You let people like him in here, and we'll be serving every bum in Chicago by next week." James flinched at the word bum, but his expression remained calm. "I'm sorry for the trouble, miss," he said to Sarah, ignoring Michael. "You didn't have to do that." Sarah shook her head, her throat tight. "It's fine. Just don't do it again, okay?" She turned away before he could respond, her cheeks burning with a mix of embarrassment and defiance. She'd done what felt right, but the cost was real $50 she couldn't afford, a hole in her budget that would sting for weeks. As she returned to the counter, Emily, her coworker, caught her arm. Sarah, what were you thinking? Emily whispered, her freckled face pale. You know Grant's gonna hold this over you. And what about your mom's meds? I couldn't just let him get arrested, Sarah said, her voice low. He was hungry. You saw him. He wasn't trying to scam anyone. Emily sighed, glancing at James, who was gathering his tattered coat and heading for the door. You're too good for this place, you know that? But you can't save everyone. Sarah didn't respond. She watched James step into the rain, his figure blurring into the night. Something about him lingered in her mind, the way he'd spoken of his past, the quiet dignity in his eyes. She shook it off, turning back to her work, but Michael wasn't. Done. You're on thin ice, Sarah, he said, leaning close, his voice dripping with venom. I don't want to see you serving people like that again. They come in here. They scare off paying customers. You hear me? Next time, I'm docking your pay and calling the cops. Yes, Mr. Grant, Sarah said, her jaw tight. She wanted to argue, to tell him that kindness wasn't a liability, but the weight of her reality, her mother's health, the bills, the rent, kept her silent. She needed this job, no matter how much it ground her down the next day. The diner was busier. A lunchtime rush driven by a rare break in the rain. Sarah moved from table to table, refilling coffee and dodging Michael's watchful eye. She was wiping down a booth when the bell chimed again, and James walked in, this time with a woman at his side. She was younger, maybe in her 30s, with sharp features and a worn jacket that matched James's disheveled look. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her eyes scanned the diner with a quiet intensity. Sarah's stomach sank. Not again. She approached cautiously, her notepad ready. Back so soon? She said, trying to keep her tone light. What can I get started for you? James smiled, a little warmer this time. This is my sister, Anna, he said, gesturing. To the woman, we're just passing through. But we're hungry, miss. Real hungry. Anna nodded, her voice soft but clear. Anything you've got, ma'am. Even leftovers would do. Sarah hesitated. She'd used her last tip to cover James's meal yesterday, and today's earnings were barely $10 so far. Michael's warning echoed in her head, and the cameras seemed to loom larger than ever. But the look in Anna's eyes, raw, unguarded hunger, tugged at her. She thought of her mother, Linda, who'd called that morning, her voice weak but hopeful, urging Sarah to keep her faith. God sees the good you do, Linda had said. Don't let this world harden you. I'll see what I can do, Sarah said finally, her voice barely audible. She glanced at Michael, who was busy berating a busboy, and made a snap decision. Wait here. She slipped into the kitchen, where a bag of leftover rolls and a few slices of pie sat on the counter, destined for the trash. The golden fork wasted food daily, a fact that gnawed at Sarah in a city where people went hungry. She'd been sneaking scraps to a group of homeless folks near the diner for weeks, a small rebellion against Michael's rules. Now, she grabbed the bag, her hand shaking, and returned to James and Anna. Here, she said, handing them the bag discreetly. Take it outside, okay? If my boss sees this, I'm done for. James's eyes softened. You're a good soul. Miss, not many like you left. Anna clutched the bag, her voice trembling. Thank you. You don't know what this means. Before Sarah could respond, Michael's voice boomed across the diner. Sarah, what the hell are you doing? He stormed over, his face red with fury. You're giving away my food now? To them? They're hungry, Mr. Grant, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. It's just leftovers. It was going in the trash anyway. That's not your call, Michael snapped. You owe me for that food, and for yesterday's stunt. I want the money now. Sarah's heart sank. She had nothing left to give, and Michael knew it. The cameras had caught her, and the other customers were watching. their whispers a low hum. James stepped forward, pulling a handful of change. From his pocket, quarters and dimes, maybe $2 at most. "This is all I've got," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Take it." Michael scoffed, swiping the coins away. "This doesn't even cover a coffee. Get out, both of you, and don't come back." As James and Anna shuffled toward the door, Sarah felt a surge of anger. She wanted to scream, to tell Michael he was wrong, but the weight of her mother's needs held her back. She turned to clean a table, her hands trembling, unaware that James's quiet gaze lingered on her, a spark of something, gratitude perhaps, or a plan flickering in his eyes. The Golden Fork Diner buzzed with the midday rush, a rare burst of activity that filled the air with the clink of cutlery and the murmur of conversation. It was the day after Sarah Miller had risked her job to slip leftovers to James Carter and his sister, Anna, a small act of defiance that had cost her dearly. Michael Grant, the diner's owner, had docked her pay for the food $10, a sum that felt like a fortune when her mother's insulin prescription loomed unpaid. Sarah's hands trembled as she refilled coffee for a table of construction workers, her mind replaying Michael's latest tirade. Asterisk, one more stunt like that, and you're out. The cameras above the counter seemed to watch her every move, a constant reminder that she was one mistake away from unemployment in a city where jobs were scarce and bills relentless. Chicago in July 2025 was a city of contrasts gleaming. Skyscrapers downtown stood in stark relief against the South Side's crumbling storefronts and overflowing shelters. The economic fallout of 2023 had left scars, with small businesses like the Golden Fork struggling to compete against corporate chains that leveraged apps and delivery drones. Sarah felt the weight of it all. The $400 insulin bill, the $250 electric bill, the student loan she'd never pay off. Her mother, Linda, had called that morning, her voice frail but warm, urging Sarah to hold on to her faith. "God's watching, baby," Linda had said. "Keep doing good, even when it's hard." Those words were Sarah's lifeline, but they felt fragile against Michael's wrath and the diner's suffocating atmosphere. As Sarah cleared a table, the bell above the door chimed, and James Carter stepped inside, his tattered coat damp from a fresh drizzle. Anna followed, her dark hair tucked under a worn scarf, her eyes scanning the diner with quiet intensity. Sarah's stomach knotted. She'd hoped they wouldn't return, not because she regretted helping them, but because Michael's rules were ironclad. No undesirables, no second chances. The cameras would catch her, and Michael was already on edge after yesterday's incident. Sarah approached their booth, her notepad clutched like a shield. "You're back," she said, her voice low, a mix of warmth and worry. "I can't keep doing this, you know? My boss, he'll fire me." James's hazel eyes met hers, steady and unapologetic. "We're not here to cause trouble, miss," he said. "Just hungry. Haven't eaten since yesterday. Anything you can spare, bread, scraps, anything." Anna nodded, her voice soft but urgent. "We don't expect handouts, but if you've got something, we'd be grateful." Sarah glanced at Michael, who was busy berating a busboy near the kitchen. The diner was packed, and he hadn't noticed James and Anna yet, but it was only a matter of time. Her heart raced. She'd already used her tips to cover James's meal 2 days ago, and yesterday's leftovers had cost her pay. She had $7 in her apron, barely enough for a bus pass home. But the memory of her mother's words and the raw hunger in Anna's eyes gnawed at her. "I'll try," Sarah whispered, her resolve hardening. "But you have to eat outside. If he sees you, I'm done." She slipped into the kitchen, where a tray of day-old muffins sat on the counter, destined for the dumpster. Food waste was a sore spot for Sarah. The Golden Fork threw out enough to feed a dozen people daily, while Chicago's homeless population swelled. She'd been sneaking scraps to a group of regulars who camped near the diner a quiet rebellion against Michael's rules and the city's indifference. Now, she grabbed a paper bag, stuffed it with muffins and a couple of bruised apples, and hurried back to James and Anna. "Here," she said, handing them the bag under the table. "Take it and go, please. Eat it down the street." James's face softened, a faint smile breaking through his weathered features. "You're a rare one, miss. Most folks would have turned us away by now." Anna clutched the bag, her voice barely audible. "Thank you. Thank you. You don't know what this means." Before Sarah could respond, Michael's voice cut through the diner like a blade. "Sarah Miller!" He stormed toward the booth, his blazer flapping, his face a mask of fury. "What the hell is this? You're giving away my food again." The diner fell silent, customers glancing up from their plates. Sarah's heart pounded, her hands clenching the edge of the table. "It's just leftovers, Mr. Grant," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "They were going in the trash. I thought, you don't get paid to think." Michael snapped, his eyes darting to James and Anna. "And you two get out before I call the cops. This isn't a soup kitchen." James stood, his movements slow but deliberate. "No need for that, sir," he said, his voice calm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins, maybe $3 in quarters and nickels, scraped from the streets. "This is all we've got. Take it for the trouble." Michael scoffed, swiping the coins to the floor. "That doesn't even cover a soda. Get out and don't come back." Sarah's anger flared, a rare spark in her usually guarded demeanor. "They're hungry, Mr. Grant," she said, her voice rising. "It's just a few muffins." "Why does it matter?" "It matters because I say so," Michael shouted, his face inches from hers. "You owe me for those muffins $12 right now, or you're done here. And don't think I didn't see you on the cameras yesterday." "You're walking a thin line, Sarah." Sarah's throat tightened. She had no money to give, and Michael knew it. The cameras, installed under the guise of security, were his weapon, a way to control his staff in a city where labor laws were stretched thin. The news had been full of stories about workplace surveillance, with workers' rights groups protesting the invasion of privacy. But for Sarah, it was just another part of the job. She felt the eyes of the customers on her, some sympathetic, others indifferent. Emily, wiping down a nearby table, shot her a look of pity but stayed silent, too afraid of Michael's wrath to intervene. James stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "Leave her be," he said to Michael, his tone firm but not aggressive. "She's got a good heart, something you might not understand. We'll go." As James and Anna moved toward the door, Sarah caught a glimpse of something in James's eyes, a flicker of resolve, maybe even a plan. He paused at the threshold, turning back to her. "You believe in second chances, miss?" he asked, his voice low. Sarah hesitated, caught off guard. I do," she said finally, thinking of her mother's faith, of the Bible verses that had carried them through hard times. James nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Hold on to that." The door closed behind them, and Sarah turned back to the diner, her hands shaking. Michael was still fuming, muttering about bums and standards, but the encounter had left her rattled. Who was James? Why did he keep coming back? And what did he mean by second chances? That evening, as Sarah rode the bus home, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Asterisk. "You okay, baby? You sound tired." Sarah typed a quick reply, assuring Linda she was fine, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't shake the image of James and Anna, their quiet gratitude, their shared hunger. She thought of the homeless encampment near the diner, where people huddled under tarps, ignored by a city too busy to care. The news had reported on a new city ordinance cracking down on encampments, pushing people like James further to the margins. Sarah had always believed in helping where she could, but each act of kindness seemed to cost her more. When she reached her apartment, Linda was waiting, her frail frame wrapped in a shawl. "Rough day?" Linda asked, her voice soft but knowing. Sarah nodded, sinking onto the couch. "I helped some people today, Mama, but it might cost me my job." Linda reached for her hand, her fingers trembling from her illness. "You did." "Right, Sarah. God sees it, even if that boss of yours doesn't. Keep your heart open. Miracles happen when you least expect them." Sarah wanted to believe her, but the weight of Michael's threats and the empty apartment felt heavier than ever. She didn't know that James and Anna were watching from a distance, their tattered clothes a disguise, their plan unfolding. Nor did she know that a customer, a young woman at a nearby table, had recorded her exchange with Michael on her phone. The video already uploaded to TikTok with the hashtag #KindnessMatters, destined to ripple far beyond the Golden Fork. Below is the detailed implementation of Part 4, the twist and the reward for the expanded 10,000-word story, written in English as requested. This part adheres to the outline structure, targeting approximately 2,200 words, and maintains the engaging, inspirational tone of the original while incorporating contemporary American issues for realism. The narrative focuses on the dramatic reveal of James and Anna Carter's true identities, Sarah's reward, and the climactic confrontation with Michael Grant, ensuring no overlap with previous parts and setting up a logical progression for Part 5, to keep the word count precise and the content manageable. I'll write Part 4 as a single section, but I'm prepared to split it into smaller segments if it feels dense or exceeds the target upon your request. The story heightens the emotional stakes, delivers a satisfying twist, and maintains a compelling hook for the final part. The Golden Fork Diner hummed with the usual lunchtime chaos, a symphony of clinking plates and murmured orders under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. It was the third day since Sarah Miller had risked her job to slip leftovers to James. Carter and his sister, Anna, and the weight of her choices pressed heavier than ever. Michael Grant's threats echoed in her mind asterisk. One more stunt, and you're out asterisk. And the $12 she'd been docked for the muffins had forced her to skip groceries that week. Her mother, Linda, was rationing her insulin, a dangerous gamble, in a healthcare system that seemed designed to punish the poor. Yet Sarah moved through her shift with quiet determination, a green eye scanning the diner for the next table to serve, her heart clinging to the belief that kindness mattered, even when it hurt. Chicago's South Side was a battleground of resilience and despair in July 2025. The city's economic wounds, deepened by the 2023 crash, were visible in the boarded-up shops and crowded shelters just blocks from the diner. Sarah had seen the news. Homelessness surges as city cracks down on encampments and felt the sting of it in her own life. Her $12 an hour wage barely covered rent, let alone her mother's medical bills or the student loans that haunted her. The Golden Fork was her lifeline, but Michael's cameras and relentless rules made it feel like a prison. Every move she made was watched, recorded, judged, a reflection of the growing surveillance culture in American workplaces, where workers' rights groups protested, but little changed as Sarah refilled coffee for a table of regulars. The bell above the door chimed, and a couple walked in, their presence commanding the room. The man was tall, with neatly trimmed gray hair and a tailored suit that spoke of wealth. The woman beside him, sharp-featured and elegant in a navy blazer, carried herself with quiet authority. Sarah's breath caught as she recognized their faces beneath the polished exterior. James and Anna Carter. Gone were the tattered coats and worn scarves. They looked like they'd stepped out of a boardroom, not an alley. The diner's chatter dipped, customers glancing up. Sensing something unusual, Sarah approached their booth, her notepad trembling in her hands. "Welcome to the Golden Fork," she said, her voice unsteady. "Can I get you something to drink?" James smiled, his hazel eyes warm but piercing. "No drinks today, miss," he said, his voice carrying the same gravelly tone but a new confidence. "We're not here to eat." Anna leaned forward, her expression kind but direct. "You don't recognize us, do you, Sarah?" Sarah's heart skipped. "Wait, James? Anna?" She glanced between them, her mind racing. "This has to be a joke, right? You were just here, looking." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at their former disheveled state. "No joke," James said, his smile widening. "We owe you an explanation. Sit down for a moment, if you can." Sarah glanced at Michael, who was behind the counter, his eyes already narrowing at the scene. The cameras loomed overhead, and she knew sitting with customers would draw his wrath. But something in James's tone, calm, almost commanding, made her pull up a chair. "Make it quick," she whispered, her stomach knotting. James leaned in, his voice low but clear. "My name's James Carter, and this is my sister Anna. We're not who we seem to be. I used to own a chain of restaurants across the Midwest. Carter's Kitchen. Maybe you've heard of it. Lost it all in the '23 crash. Then we've been rebuilding, quietly. Anna runs our international operations in London, and I've been scouting locations for a new venture here in Chicago." Sarah's eyes widened. Carter's Kitchen had been a household name before the crash, known for its farm-to-table ethos and community outreach. She'd never connected the dots. So why? Why the act? The tattered clothes, the meals you couldn't pay for? Anna spoke, her voice steady. "We've been visiting restaurants across the city for the past week, testing people. Not just their service, but their hearts. We're opening a new chain, Sarah, and we need someone to lead it, someone with integrity, empathy, someone who doesn't just see dollar signs." "You're the only one who passed." Sarah's head spun. "Passed? What do you mean?" James chuckled softly. 3 days ago, you paid for my meal out of your own pocket. Yesterday, you gave us food you knew would cost you. You didn't have to do that. Most people wouldn't, but you did, even with that boss of yours breathing down your neck." Sarah glanced at Michael, who was now striding toward the booth, his face a storm cloud. Her heart raced. "I don't understand." "Why me?" Before James could answer, Michael's voice cut in. "Sarah, what do you think you're doing sitting with customers? Get back to work." His eyes darted to James and Anna, taking in their polished appearance. "And you folks, what's this about? You here to eat or cause trouble?" James stood, his height and presence suddenly commanding. "We're here to talk to Sarah, not you," he said, his tone firm but polite. "But since you're here, let's clear something up. Sarah's a better person than you'll ever understand. She helped us when we looked like we had nothing, and you punished her for it." Michael's face reddened. "This is my restaurant, pal. I decide who gets served and who doesn't. Those bums you were pretending to be. They scare off paying customers. Sarah's lucky she's still got a job." Sarah's hands clenched under the table, her anger flaring. She wanted to speak, but fear of losing her job, her mother's lifeline, kept her silent. Anna, however, leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You're wrong about her, and you're wrong about people. Sarah's the kind of person who makes a place like this worth coming to. You're the one driving customers away." Michael scoffed, but before he could retort, James reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a check. "Sarah, this is for you," he said, sliding it across the table. $5,000 for what you've done for us. You deserve it, and more." Sarah stared at the check, her breath catching. 5,000? For me? But why? For your heart, Anna said softly. And because we want you to join us. We're opening a new restaurant in Chicago, Carter's Kitchen, reborn. We need a manager, someone with your compassion and strength. The job comes with a good salary, benefits, and a chance to grow. Whoa, you consider it? Sarah's mind reeled. A manager's job? Benefits? It was more than she dared to dream, a lifeline for her and her mother. But Michael's voice shattered the moment. She's not going anywhere, he snapped. Sarah's. Under contract, an open-ended one. She leaves, I'll sue her for breach. And that money? He pointed at the check. She hasn't earned it. No service, no tip. Hand it over, Sarah. The diner went silent, customers watching, some pulling out phones to record. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the check, her eyes darting between James, Anna, and Michael. She thought of her mother, of the insulin they couldn't afford, of the years she'd endured Michael's insults. The cameras were rolling, but for once, she didn't care. No, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I'm keeping it. And? I'm done here, Mr. Grant. I quit. Michael's jaw dropped. You quit? You think you can just walk out? You'll be back, begging for this job when you're broke. James stepped forward, his voice like steel. She won't be back. And? You, sir, have lost the best employee you'll ever have. Sarah's coming with us, and if you try to make trouble, I've got lawyers who'll bury you in paperwork. Your choice. Anna stood, her presence calm but commanding. Sarah, we'll teach you everything you need to know. You're not just an employee, you're family now. Come with us, and let's talk about your future. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness but from a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. She nodded, clutching the check, and followed James and Anna toward the door. The customers erupted in applause, some cheering, others filming the scene. Sarah glanced back at Michael, his face a mask of shock and fury, and felt a weight lift. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time, she believed it could be better done. As they stepped into the rain, James turned to her. You believe in second chances, Sarah. This is yours. Unbeknownst to Sarah, the video of her confrontation with Michael was already spreading on TikTok, tagged with #KindnessMatters and #GoldenForkDrama. By evening, it would have thousands of views, a spark that would change the diner's fate and Sarah's in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The Chicago skyline glittered against the evening sky, a mosaic of hope and hustle that Sarah Miller had rarely paused to admire. It was late July 2025, 2 weeks since she'd walked out of the Golden Fork Diner, clutching a $5,000 check and a job offer that felt like a dream. Now, standing in the sleek modern office of Carter's Kitchen, a soon-to-open restaurant in Chicago's West Loop, Sarah felt a spark of something she hadn't known in years. Possibility. The office smelled of fresh paint and ambition. Its glass walls overlooking a bustling street where food trucks and tech startups competed for attention. Sarah, dressed in a crisp blazer provided by Anna Carter, was no longer a waitress scraping by. She was a manager in training, stepping into a world she'd never imagined. The transition hadn't been easy. Leaving the Golden Fork had meant leaving behind the only stability she'd known, however suffocating it was. Her mother, Linda, had been her anchor, her frail hands squeezing Sarah's as she'd whispered, "This is your miracle, baby. Don't be afraid." The $5,000 from James Carter had covered Linda's insulin for months and paid off the overdue electric bill, lifting a weight that had crushed Sarah for years. But the new job came with challenges learning inventory systems, managing staff, navigating the cutthroat world of Chicago's restaurant scene in 2025, where apps like DoorDash and Uber Eats dominated and customers expected Instagram-worthy plates. Yet, under James and Anna's guidance, Sarah felt respected, valued, a far cry from Michael Grant's relentless criticism. Carter's Kitchen was a rebirth of James's pre-2023 empire, reimagined for a post-crash world. The restaurant focused on affordable, locally sourced meals, with a mission to hire people like Sarah, those with heart and grit, not just resumes. James had spent the past week walking her through the basics: budgeting, customer service, even how to handle the inevitable online reviews. Anna, who'd flown in from London for the launch, taught her about branding and community outreach, emphasizing the importance of giving back. "We're not just serving food," Anna had said, her sharp eyes softening. "We're building a place where people feel seen." Sarah's first task was organizing a soft opening for the restaurant, set for next week. She'd spent hours coordinating with suppliers, training a small team of servers, and designing a menu that balanced quality with accessibility, a nod to the city's struggling working class. The work was daunting, but every late night was fueled by the knowledge that this job came with a $60,000 salary and health benefits, enough to secure Linda's care and give Sarah a chance to breathe. For the first time, she saw a future beyond survival. Meanwhile, the Golden Fork Diner was unraveling. The video of Sarah's confrontation with Michael, captured by a customer and posted on TikTok with hashtag #KindnessMatters, had exploded, racking up over 500,000 views in days. The clip showed Michael's tirade, his dismissal of James and Anna as bums, and Sarah's quiet defiance as she quit. Comments poured in. "This is why I don't eat at places like this. Asterisk. Sarah's a hero." Local news picked up the story, framing it as a tale of compassion versus greed in a city grappling with economic inequality. The hashtag boycott Golden Fork trended, and by the second week, the diner's table sat mostly empty, its neon sign flickering like a fading pulse. Michael Grant was reeling. Customers who'd once been regulars now avoided the Golden Fork, their loyalty eroded by the viral video and whispers of his harsh treatment of staff. Yelp reviews plummeted, with 1-star ratings citing toxic management and heartless vibes. Chicago's restaurant scene was unforgiving in 2025, with diners quick to shun businesses that clashed with the city's growing push for social justice. Michael tried to save face, posting a half-hearted apology on the diner's Instagram, but it was drowned out by comments demanding accountability. He'd lost 2 other servers, Emily among them, who'd followed Sarah's lead and quit, tired of his bullying and the $12 an hour wage that barely kept up with inflation. Sarah heard about the diner's struggles through Emily, who texted her a link to the viral video. "You're a legend, Sarah," Emily wrote. "Grant's getting what he deserves." Sarah watched the clip, her heart heavy. She didn't hate Michael, she pitied him, a man so consumed by control that he'd pushed away the very people who kept his business alive. But she couldn't dwell on it. Her focus was on Carter's kitchen, on proving she was worthy of the chance James and Anna had given her. One evening, as Sarah finalized the soft opening menu, James called her into his office. He looked different. Now clean-shaven, confident, a far cry from the disheveled man who'd ordered a ribeye he couldn't pay for. "You're doing great, Sarah," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But I want to tell you why we chose you." Sarah sat, her hands clasped, still half expecting this to be a dream. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around it," she admitted. "Why me? I'm just a waitress." James shook his head. "You're not just anything. We tested dozens of people across Chicago, servers, managers, owners. Most saw us as a problem to be swept away. You saw us as people. That's rare, Sarah, especially in a world that's gotten so hard. The crash in 23 took everything from me, but it taught me what matters. Heart, not money. You've got that." Anna, who joined them, nodded. "Our restaurants abroad thrive because we hire people who care. You're going to lead this one, Sarah, and we'll be here to guide you. But it's your vision, your heart, that'll make it special." Sarah's eyes welled up, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She thought of her mother, of the years spent scraping by, of the faith that had carried her through. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick. "It's everything." "You don't need to thank us," James said. Just keep being you. That's enough. The soft opening of Carter's Kitchen was a success, drawing a diverse crowd: families, young professionals, even a few homeless folks invited as part of the restaurant's community outreach. Sarah moved through the night with quiet confidence, greeting guests, checking on her team, and feeling, for the first time, like she belonged. A local food blogger posted about the event, praising the authentic warmth and inclusive vibe, and the hashtag kindness matters hashtag resurfaced, linking back to Sarah's story. By morning, Carter's Kitchen was trending, a beacon of hope in a city hungry for it. Back at the Golden Fork, Michael faced a reckoning. With business dwindling, he was forced to sell the diner to a chain, a bitter pill for a man who dreamed of grandeur. The new owners promised better wages and working conditions, a small victory for the staff who'd stayed. Michael disappeared from the scene, his reputation tarnished, a cautionary tale of what happens when greed overshadows humanity. Sarah's journey is a testament to the power of kindness in a world that often rewards cynicism. Her willingness to help James and Anna, despite the personal cost, reflects a universal truth. Small acts of compassion can ripple outward, changing lives in ways we can't predict. In 2025 America, where economic hardship and social divides test our humanity, Sarah's story reminds us that empathy is a choice, one that can bridge gaps and heal wounds. Her faith, rooted in her mother's teachings, underscores the idea that goodness, even when unseen, is never wasted. The viral video that exposed Michael's cruelty and elevated Sarah's kindness shows the amplifying power of community through platforms like TikTok. One person's story can inspire thousands. This tale challenges us to look beyond appearances, to see the potential in others, and to act with courage, knowing that true wealth lies in the heart. If Sarah's story moved you, join us at Legacy Stories on YouTube, where we share tales of compassion, resilience, and hope. Subscribe to catch more inspiring narratives that remind us of the good in the world, and share your thoughts in the comments. How has kindness changed your life? Let's keep the conversation going and spread the message that good deeds, no matter how small, can create a legacy of change.